All right, I think we're live. So welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals, by the way. So everybody watching out there or who will watch in the future, welcome to the show. What we're trying to do right now, hey guys, little comment already. What we're trying to do is we have a new series going, which is really Nick's brainchild, and which is great, called Friends of Wisdom. And I want to say a few things about this. It may have just caught some people off guard that, hey, there's these different kinds of videos out there. What's going on? What are you guys doing? Okay. And so I'm going to, of course, ask Nick to talk more about this, but I want to say my own spiel on this first. There is a dearth of Christians who are worth looking up to. They're dropping like flies. Jesus even said that the children of this world are wiser than the children of light in their generation. And so every once in a while, you got to do like Solomon, and you look outside your in group and you try to see. So Philippians 3:17 says, "Brethren, be followers together of me, and mark them which walk so as ye have us for an ensample." And so what we've done is we've looked around, and Nick has done a lot of this, is you found some people that are like, hey, when it comes to this particular thing, I'd like a double portion of that spirit. I would like the capacity to be able to do what so-and-so is doing. I may not agree with them on all the things, but I'd like to do what they are doing. And, speaking of, I hate to get all sad and everything, but speaking of, Christians not being a lot of them that you can look up to these days. A lot of people are ideologically possessed. One of the ones that I knew personally, that I got a lot of enlightenment from, I thought he was a divergent thinker, was a pastor of Heritage Bible Church, and he passed away this morning at 11:20. So that's devastating news, and it's devastating news for a variety of reasons. Like, that's sad, first of all, but the amount of insight and light that would just pour out of this guy's mouth every time he opened it is just not going to happen anymore. And so this Philippians 3:17 thing is something that needs to be taken very seriously. So what we're doing on the channel, and I'll let Nick talk more about this in a second. So what we're doing is we're trying to, look at this Philippians 3:17 thing and look around and see where the abstraction of the pattern of Christ can be seen in a lot of different places. So we're trying to look around and see where else we can find it, and then have dialogues with these people to find out, hey, what's the secret? How do you roast your coffee to make it turn out that way? What's going on here? So, and then hopefully we can bring some of those skills or some of that ecology of practices. We can develop a collection of activities that can be done. We can bring them into FSI, bring them into Beyond the Fundamentals to help us out, glean from what we can find. And Nick, I guess I'll let you talk about it. And we got some slides here. If you want me to put those up, let me know. Welcome aboard.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.
Good to have you.
So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons / justifications and provocations that springboard off of, inspirations that this whole, I guess we'll call it, project is kind of deriving from, so maybe some of them will just kind of come out naturally. So one of the reasons why it's probably a really good thing that we're doing this is because, like you said, it did kind of seem like these weird videos just appeared. And so, it would be nice to give the audience a little bit of context and a little bit of a map of, if you will, of what they should be looking for, what should be happening, and why this should be, worth their time. And so, to give a little bit of that context, number one, I really think the number one thing for me personally is the imminence of it.
Yeah.
So
There's
like,
no time to lose.
right. So like, it kind of makes me think of like 2 Timothy 3, where Paul is saying to Timothy, from thy youth thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it just makes me kind of think of something like that, where the notion of wisdom, the practice of wisdom, and therefore the cultivation of wisdom is something that for me, as I grow older, becomes more imminent and more necessary. Like it's really not an option for me. And
Right.
and that's kind of sort of what I'm getting
I think
from
you pointed that
Paul.
out when you were talking to Guy Sengstock, where you parroted John Vervaeke, where he said, wisdom isn't an option. You have to live this life. You can either suffer through it or you can develop wisdom so that you don't have to suffer through it. You're going to go through it anyway. Might as well make the best of it.
Exactly. And so, the good news about that is, there's a pessimism to it, where it's like, oh, there's this huge mountain to climb, and there's all of these decisions and things in the world that are, from a certain perspective, just insurmountable. But the good news with wisdom is that it's a notion, a practice, and an idea and a thing that there is a lot of availability. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of literature on it. It's been something that has been discussed at length for so longer than you and I can conceive of. And so, that means that we should have access to at least investigating into it,
Mm-hmm.
and so the Bible, I mean, for crying out loud, when Jesus, I think it's in like Luke, it's at the end of Luke, when Jesus is taking the two travelers through the scriptures, he calls a whole section, like he cuts off a whole section of scripture as the books of wisdom, or the Psalms, or something like that. And so it's something that's very salient and important in the Bible. It shows up probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it shows up in almost every book of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And so really all I'm trying to convey at first stab at this is the imminence and the necessity to orient oneself towards wisdom. And again, from a biblical standpoint, I think that the book of Proverbs just completely like puts wisdom at center stage. And it's like the most important thing.
So when you talk about the
wisdom.
the most, he seeketh me earlier, betimes, the Bible uses that word too. It's important to get it as early as you can. The imminence of it. There are different things you can do in life, and we tend to have these mindsets. Like there are some things that you can put off, like, oh, one day I'll get to it. One day I'll do this. One day I'll do that. The aspiration to grow in wisdom is not one of those things. It is not something that can be put off. It's not something that we cannot be intentional about. We must be intentional about it, and assertively intentional and motivated. And this is something that's got to happen.
Yeah. Thanks for, pushing that notion further. So I guess maybe we should go into, so there's the necessity of it, right?
Yep.
I think we've established that.
You want me to put the slides up and look at these things, or?
Yeah. So there's another notion of, well, Paul says in 1 Corinthians that the Greek seeks after wisdom. And in the context, there's reasons why he's saying that, but I think one of the points that I want to draw out from that is our whole society, our whole civilization as we know it in America is really predicated. It really takes its roots on this Greekified society.
Yeah.
And something you mentioned in your radio broadcast today, was that whole thing. And so there's the whole other reason why we would put a focus on this notion of wisdom and in the cultivation of it, is because it's embedded in the very civilization that we find ourselves in. Because again, the way we do our civilization now is completely constructed by men and some women over 2,000 years ago, who were really, ultimately, they were aimed at getting a hold and cultivating this thing called wisdom. And what they produced was notions of how to relate in society and build a civilization that is sustainable and flourishing for all intensive purposes. This is obviously a historical perspective, not necessarily a religious perspective on the thing. So there's an element.
What unsustainable? I had some spam in the chat. Somebody's posting some stuff that they didn't even post. So you said what unsustainable?
I forget. Flourishing, probably, like flourishing and sustainable.
Flourishing and sustainable. Right. That makes sense. Because you can be flourishing on a short-term, non-iterable game and flourish yourself into non-existence if you're not careful.
Right. And so, if we take this historical perspective from the standpoint of our current situation, the civilization that we find ourselves situated in is one that is predicated on over 2,000 years of dialogue and working out of this notion of wisdom. And it's really important to get a hold of that. It wasn't just some, really smart person or lucky person who thought this whole thing out by himself. It was through a series of dialogues, of conversation, of distributed cognition, really, that we have almost everything that is creative in the world. And we see that even in the biblical, even in the religious perspective, the world is made. God, it says somewhere, I think it's Proverbs 8, that wisdom is speaking and as personified as a woman, and she's saying that I was with God when he created the world, and it was by me that he created the world. That's the kind of language you're getting out of it. So what that's conveying is that it was by wisdom that God created things. And so there's also a notion in scripture that it was by this Greek notion of logos, of creative, powerful meaning, or in the engendering of meaning into a potentiality space, that things are created. And so when you link up those two ideas, it's like through the process of dialogos, two logos, there's something that can happen in terms of the cultivation of wisdom, whereby we as humans, as creatures created in the image of God can participate in the creative act that brought the very world into being.
So I don't want somebody to take this the wrong way, but it's kind of like biologically, when a man and woman come together, you have a child, you participate in creation by intertwining your humanity together, and something that you didn't create your own humanity, but you can use it to create humanity. It's already flowing through you. It's already part of you. It's already part of what you are. And you can actually get with any other person and kind of have a wisdom baby, if you will. You can cultivate an insight. When a man and woman a husband and wife come together, you can create a child that's never existed before and will never exist again. And you can do that with insight cultivation through the dialogos. People tend to think that like all the information that is available is already floating around out there and it can all be captured. But there's the problem. But it's not like that. There's actually new information for right now that has not been captured somewhere else. And we can generate it. We can make it through dialogos. We can capture the spirit. The logos can speak through us together, and we can cultivate new insight that has not heretofore. I know people are going to say, "Oh, there's nothing new under the sun." Well, the cultivation of insight isn't new, but it is ongoing. Like having a baby isn't new, but that one is. You see,
right? The process is not new.
Right.
The products of the process can
Yes.
be new if
Yes.
they're made in Christ, in whom all things are made new. And it's Jesus who says in Luke numerous times, like in with the notion of the engendering of the logos and the participation of two human entities in the creative act, that wisdom is justified of her children. He says it number of times. And that's what he's getting at, is that the fruits of whatever creative act will be justified of the sort that they are.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Wisdom is justified of her children. So, that's where the whole notion that you were getting at the other day, sorry, about like vain philosophies that spoil people. Those are unjustified wisdom traditions or acts of wisdom which spoil, and the children of that wisdom are not justified.
Well, I would also say that what makes sense to me is kind of like the concept of aporia, where as a recipient, if I am able to be a recipient of wisdom, I am able to hold what seems like a contradiction and may be difficult to explain, but it's justified to me. Like I understand where these things fit. Might not be able to explain it to you. Like if you were to take a cylinder and you were to cut it crosswise and transsectionally, you could have what looks like a circle from one side and then what looks like a rectangle from another side. Since you've seen the third dimension, you can justify the different two dimensions, even though they look different. You can justify them. Whereas that kind of thing, where it's possible to have a perspective that is not easy to convey to other people. Yeah, wisdom is not a zero-sum game, Roberta says. It's possible to hold a perspective that's difficult to convey to somebody else who does not also hold that perspective, which also makes it a kind of a frustrating thing.
Yeah, that's a really great analogy with right. So here's a little bit more of an abstract one. Like 4 times 3 equals 12. That's true. That's like the true in like the wisdom used in order to, solve that equation is true.
Yeah.
But also 6 plus 6 equals 12.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another perspective.
It's a different function too.
It's through a different function, right? That is justified. It's equaled.
In alignment with.
In alignment with, exactly. So with all that said, you can see why the book of Proverbs is as the kind of like the chief book of wisdom, if you will, if like is putting wisdom center stage. And the way that it puts wisdom center stage is by trying to get you to interact with it.
So, as we're saying this, when you were talking to Guy Sengstock the other day, he used the word sovereignty in a way which would be a good description of wisdom too. So I had this vision as he was talking. I had this imaginal representation in my head of like you're in the agency arena, attunement space, and reality of the arena is flying at you, and you're doing all the correct things with what's flying at you. He referred to that as sovereignty, like able to process, the prehension and concrescence of reality in the appropriate way and being in attunement with that. He referred to that as sovereignty. And I think it is also maybe that sovereignty is a measure of wisdom in that case as well. So it's not this stagnant thing. It's not a list of dictums or wise sayings. It's not something that sits on a page somewhere. It is a capability with dealing with, or you might say juggling reality as it comes to you and doing it well. It's a process. It's to see God as the process of reality and to be able to move in attunement with it.
Yeah, the way he used sovereignty was analogous to as if he said sovereignty equals ultimate agentic capacity or competency or something.
Yeah. So to hear him talk about it and to hear Jordan Hall talk about sovereignty, put those together, it's amazing.
Right. So yeah, I guess we could look at the little
slidications.
Yes, that thing.
That thing. See if my arrows are working here. All right, I got to put my fancy handy dandy thumbnail up there. All right, so there's the thumbnail, and then slide number 1. It was only 2 slides.
So this is me just writing to myself basically. So I'm trying to use specific words and things like that. So, it's not like I didn't write this for, public consumption.
Right.
So, people can just give me a second to try and explain myself as I was trying to talk to myself in a way. So the whole part of the purpose of this particular video is to sort of orient and offer a what they call an orientation video or program in order to, I know Kevin hates that word.
No, just my wife and I have this running joke, which she refers to a television show as a program. My wife she has a couple years on me. So I'm like, that's what old people say. Program.
So this is sort of an attempt to offer the audience an orienting factor or a map so that when the series continues, they kind of can know what to look for.
Kind of where you are and what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And part of the spirit of the whole video series is for people to have a visual and audio demonstration of the very practice of the cultivation of wisdom. Because like we said, there's our whole society and civilization is predicated on this phenomenon, this practice. And then from a biblical standpoint or from a religious standpoint, the whole creation of the world is predicated on this practice.
Because the wisdom was there when God created.
So from a historical and a religious or mythological, and again, not the mythological in the sense that it's false, but the mythological in the sense that it's mysterious. The cultivation and execution of wisdom is down to the very roots of it. So what we're aiming for in these videos is to engage in an interrogative dialogue or trilogue about and through wisdom. And so part and parcel of that is in the act of talking or speaking or communicating about or through wisdom, what you should see is the participants trying to execute or demonstrate or practice wisdom in the very discussion. And so a particular discussion could be about a particular wisdom practice, say like circling.
Right.
So what you should have seen in the video between Guy and myself was the wisdom tradition or practice of circling. That's what you should have seen, however badly. And
so I noticed, when I listen to some of those other people, like for example, I noticed Jordan Hall doing this a lot. He will, before he comments, he'll be having a dialogue with somebody, and before he comments on something, he will talk about how the other person's comment made him feel in that exact moment.
Okay. Yeah.
He will spit their idea back out to them. What I'm hearing you say is this, and I feel what I'm feeling is da 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 da, and then he'll respond. And that's very interesting to me to notice this.
That is specifically a circling technique. And so for what I understand of circling, which is not all that much, but it is a wisdom practice. And one of the techniques, like if you're a soccer player, one of the techniques you learn how to do is dribble the ball. So in the wisdom practice of circling, one of the techniques is I forget what they call it, but basically it's you trying to situate yourself inside of your body and to notice what your body is communicating to you, and for you to articulate that and communicate it to the person, because
this is so good. I can only imagine the impact this has on a person's emotional quotient. Because emotions start at the body.
Right. And it's all predicated on the faith or the hope or anticipation that it is through this dichotomous participatory interaction with another human being that something creative and something good will emerge.
Yes.
Which doesn't just happen at the propositional level. In fact, the propositional level of creative insight is probably the last level at which the creative insight or the creative thing kind of concresses. And so you want to be able to communicate in a participatory way with yourself, but also learn how to communicate that participatory
sensation,
sensation with another person, right? And so that is what Jordan Hall is doing. And, I find it like, completely honest, I find it very uncomfortable to try to do something like that.
Well, here's, just by watching Jordan Hall do it and by hearing about circling and having read about it, what I noticed, and I hate to keep talking about my wife. Actually, I don't. That's all I want to talk about. But when we started, one thing I noticed about her right away, and this is one of my frustrations, is that some of the things that have taken me years to grasp, she does intuitively. But I noticed my wife and Jordan Hall, and they didn't learn it from each other, doing this same thing. Something happens, and then she immediately tells me how it makes her feel. And it could be a bite of food. It could be something I said. It could be a kiss. It could be something like that. So very early on in the relationship, I started noticing that she does this. She tells me how something makes her feel right when it happens. And it sparks these amazing conversations and then there's this reciprocal opening to where we start to understand and know each other. And it's not so much that we arrive at these amazing propositions of truth and solve the world hunger or whatever. It's not like that. It's just, we just open up this arena in each other, and it's good to dwell there, and we feel safe to dwell there.
Yes.
I've never felt so safe in being able to talk to somebody before. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
Just naturally.
So it's like, it's kind of predicated on this, again, this faith that my sense of connection to God and to the world is not relying on this very superficial, very degenerative, very fragile space of propositions or of language of that.
Right.
My sense of connectedness.
Fragility was a great way to say that.
Yeah. My sense of connectedness to God and to the world and to my wife and to my, to anybody is all predicated on a relationship. And that relationship is established through an interpenetrating and intertwining of participation with the other.
Yes.
And so if we want to cultivate meaningful relationships with other people, which I don't know that I need to try to make an argument for, but it is something very clearly in like Ephesians 4:16 that there's a body of individuals that are fitly joined together.
Yes.
The level at which that needs to start is in this space of primordial participatory sense of each other. And so if I can authentically know how to participate with myself as embedded in my body, then I can learn how to communicate that with another person.
Yes.
And that's part of the struggle nowadays, is that people are they're terrified of even participating with themselves. Right. So if you can't,
that's right. They are. They're afraid to be in a room by themselves. We have so many things that distract us. Like I got my phone in my pocket over here. In front of me, I got a computer. I got an iPad right there. I got another iPad over there. I got so many things I can stick in front of my face to help me escape from my own thoughts. And then my own thoughts about myself too. And even if I'm left to my thoughts, I might not think about the things I need to be thinking about.
Right. And so this authentic integration of your sense of self, which is where the whole Socratic notion of know thyself comes from. If that integration can be established and achieved successfully, then it kind of emits this presence where now others can get to know you and you have an easy time, like it comes naturally to you to share oneself with another because you know yourself. And so like when we look at Jesus, like why is it so easy for people to get to know Jesus is what I'm getting at.
So, I want to address a couple of comments in the comments section. So very good comments. Somebody was asking about the difference between faith or wisdom as a gift versus wisdom as some other thing. And, wisdom, there's lots of spiritual gifts in 1 Corinthians 12 and Romans 12 and things like that. But we're also told in Proverbs, we're admonished repeatedly that it must be something you seek after. In the book of James, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not. So it is something that can be sought after and asked for and obtained.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the body, also made a point, we're taught not to trust ourselves, believe in Jesus, in the comments said. That's right. You're taught not to trust yourself, and why there's a variety of reasons for that. But one of the things you want to do is in a Hebrews 5:14 kind of way. Those who by reason of use have exercised their senses to discern both good and evil. Another word I like to use to paraphrase that is to calibrate yourself so that you know what you are telling yourself and you learn yourself. Jordan Peterson talks about not tyrannizing yourself. You could say, I'm going to get up at 4:30 every day and go to the gym, but will you really? What are you actually likely to do? How well do you know yourself? Well, maybe you'll get up every other day at 4:30, or maybe you need to bump it back to 5, something like that. Do what you know you will actually do. Don't tyrannize yourself. And then when you start to feel these sensations, like maybe I'm a Baptist and you say to me, I'm not so sure about this eternal security thing, I could start to feel all kinds. I could feel defensive. I might feel angry. I might feel offended. I might feel vindictive. I might feel like I have to tell you, I have to set you straight, you and the world, right? And it's important to actually think about how that thing is making me feel and how dysregulated it might be making me, and how it might be getting my limbic system, my base level, emotional system all riled up for no good reason. And so if I know that I'm doing that, if I've seen myself get riled up before, I might sit there and learn some techniques. Hey, like I know how my polyvagal nerve feels, or my vagus nerve. And so if I feel myself going defensive, maybe I'll try to stop being defensive and try to be more open, because they say you can only be defensive or open. You cannot be both. Somebody told me, well, I can be both. You can't. You can be one or the other. And the type of people who can regulate that better tend to be the people who do better, have more agency, and become leaders, those kinds of things. So there is an issue where you need to get to know yourself so that you can calibrate yourself, because it's right. Until you do that, you can't trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, how can you expect somebody else to trust you either, right? So there's this passage that I like to put side by side. I'm going to show this passage real quick. I like to put it side by side with Ephesians 4:16. And it's in Colossians chapter 2, verse 19, where these guys are, doing vainly puffed up in their fleshly mind, but in 19, and not holding the head, which those are the, guys in error not doing that. So what we should be doing, we should be holding the head, which is Christ, in the proper place, from which all the body by joints and bands, having nourishment, ministered and knit together, increaseth with the increase of God. There is an increase from God that comes with being knit together in relationship with other people, that you cannot get without that relationality. Now, I'll be quiet in a second. One more comment Believe in Jesus said, and he's right on the money with this. It's amazing how insightful this guy sees. I can see how people with mental disabilities or struggles could be greatly hindered in trying to practice this. Now, that reminds me, as I've looked into circling, as I've looked into Rule Omega and good faith dialogue, not being ideologically possessed, being both post-naive and post-cynical in your approach to things, and being able to find other people who are also not, they're not naive, but they're also not cynical. It's difficult to find people that way. One of the things Jordan Hall says on a regular basis is people who have healed from trauma, like people who have PTSD. Now, this could open up a whole new can of worms here, because I don't consider myself an expert on this, but I have had reasons in my family life to read quite a bit of literature about mental illness and about PTSD and things like that. And one of the things that happens with PTSD is that a person's emotions, as they occur in your body, get dissociated from how they think in their head. For example, if you get nervous because you're about to speak in public, you might say, I'm feeling butterflies in my stomach, or I got choked up and I couldn't talk. So you feel something in your neck, you know where you're feeling something. And that's part of what you want to do when you're encircling is something makes you feel a certain way, and you think about where in your body you're feeling it, how it makes you feel, and then you express that. Well, somebody who has been traumatized, oftentimes as a result of the trauma, they are physiologically changed so that the connection between how they're feeling and where that's happening is not connected anymore. So that the feeling is there enough to make them act out in a fit of rage, but they don't know why. And they don't know, they might say, I'm feeling anxiety, but they can't tell you where they're feeling it. So it is very much a consideration. And I would tell somebody else, because I think, we were talking earlier today, there's some, I don't want to call them copycat groups in a bad way, because it's not a bad thing at all, but there are other people out there trying to do what FSI is trying to do, like in their local churches and things like that. Got an email from one guy who's even doing this with kids, which I think is amazing. If you're involved with something like this, we need to be very aware that some people who want to participate may not be able to participate for a variety of reasons, but mental illness might be one of those things, or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then complex post-traumatic stress disorder, any number of those things. I think it's, like you said, it's eminence to learn wisdom. I think Christians also need to have a basic working knowledge of mental health and mental illness, and kind of what's out there and what some of the major symptoms are, so that they can kind of know what they're dealing with before they get in too deep with something that might not be healthy for anybody involved. All right, I'm going to stop my little dialogue here, or monologue. It's supposed to be a dialogue.
I've been thinking about saying this since last night. And so I'm just going to say it, because it came up last night in my mind during FSI. And I'm like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And then you just said what you said. So now I'm just going to say it. This is just my opinion, and it's also just an observation. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's not like I'm, it's also sort of a proposal that I want people to not just answer, or freak out at. I would rather have you sit and think about it, like let it simmer and interact with the idea. And it's that in a lot of Christians that I've interacted with, so I got saved in 2017. So I haven't been a Christian for that long.
Right.
It's not like I grew up with the Bible. I didn't grow up in a church. I knew nothing about any of this stuff. And what I've seen, this is my personal evaluation and observation of friends and people that I have, family that have been enmeshed in a Christianized or a Christian, explicitly Christian upbringing. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of what most of the world would and probably like ancient Christianity, like early Christianity would consider deep, fleshy, unsuccessful, personal character integration. So there's a lot of character interpersonal issues with
like non-integration.
Yeah.
Like people lack character and personal integrity. They're not integral.
Yep.
I'm not saying integrity like they're lying, but the integrity of the person, like a building has integrity.
Yeah. Yes. It's very fragile. Very, very fragile. And the thing is that it's all predicated on, or it's all justified by, well, but I grew up in like the greatest like wisdom tradition of Christianity. And the thing is that wisdom is justified of her children. And it's like, if Christianity is this, or is this great thing, then why do I see so many so-called Christians with these the children of this wisdom tradition?
Yes.
Why are they so misaligned and misformed? Misformed as characters?
How come this wisdom tradition isn't producing any wise people?
Exactly. And so one of the things that the proposal I want to make here, that I'm like taking forever to draw out, and I'm sorry, is I think that part of the issue is the Bible. I think that it's the way that Christians learn how to integrate and intertwine themselves with Scripture. That is it's such a basic, it's like a very deep fundamental problem. And if I'm like a wise person, or a person who has concern for the cultivation, the character cultivation of others, for, altruistic reasons and for selfish reasons, because I need other people to live in the world. So I think to myself, if this book is such an issue and has perpetuated this misformulation of characters because it's been mishandled, then why am I trying to use that thing to, in a sense, try and help them on a path of personal rehabilitation?
Right. That seems like it might be the handling it wrongly in the first place was the cause of the error.
Right. And so, like, if you had somebody who had an issue with, an addiction on something, and it's causing pain, it's causing mischaracter integration and problems in their life, the way to get them to rehabilitate themselves is not to give them that thing.
Right.
So
right. Also they need to admit that thing is an issue.
Right. And if that is, and that is kind of tricky too, because if they won't admit it's an issue, which again, like how could I sit here as a Christian and say the Bible's an issue? You know what I'm saying? I'm very clearly saying it's the handling of the Bible.
It's how it's interacted with.
But yes,
I found that no matter what domain you're in, the how is so big. We've been talking about that on our channel a lot lately, how if you look at the Bible for the what, it seems like most of Christianity is focused on the what, but if you look at it for the how, it starts to turn into a different book. And anything can be weaponized. If you have a person who's in rivalrous mode, they can weaponize, and I've seen people weaponize psychological information, they weaponize religious information, political, anything they can hit somebody else over the head with. As soon as they learn the terminology for what a bad thing is, as soon as they get mad at you, they're going to start calling you all that terminology. I've seen that. So what I think I hear you saying is
because there's a lot I haven't said. There's a lot that I'm not saying. Yeah.
But a lot of Christians, because you're on Team Christian, we are prompted to justify and excuse all the things that we see as one-offs and not a product, not a feature. But what I hear you saying is that when I look around, yeah, we're supposed to be having a wisdom tradition here, but I'm not seeing a lot of wisdom fruit here. And to be able to admit that, like, I have committed myself to this thing, which, as far as I can tell, as applied, isn't working. Now, that the necessity, the importance of being in touch with what you actually see and feel and experience is so important, because when you're steeped in a paradigm, you basically get taught to put those things in the background, to not make them salient, to background them instead of foreground them, and kind of pretend those inconsistencies aren't there. Like, oh yes, this is a great wisdom tradition. Forget the fact that like 98% of the people in the church and the wisest and oldest ones who hold all the position are just wicked as the devil. Forget that. And let me pretend that this thing is still good anyway. Well, something's happening wrong. We got to figure out what that is. I had my moment like this, to be honest, to open up, is after my parents got divorced, and then after I got divorced. We were all supposed to be the people who were doing it right. We had all the sound doctrine, we had all the correct stuff, and the thing that we valued the most, which was family, did not persist through that. Now, there was things that we weren't prepared for. There was mental illness and a variety of other things that we had no idea what it was at the time. But it caused you to stop and recognize, hey, and so at this point now, it's for everybody watching this and just doing cheetah flips and thinking we're trying to turn people away from the Bible. That's not what's happening at all. What I'm realizing is that if you adjust the approach and start handling the Bible differently, if you look at it as a how instead of a what, for example, among other things, there is a healing component to the Bible, but the ideological possessed version of Christianity that we've been pursuing is the opposite of that. It's not healing anybody. It's actually causing a lot of problems that need to be healed. All right. I will stop my rant.
Yeah.
I'll let you continue with that line of thinking.
My proposal is it's something I'm not saying because I'm so terrified to say it, but it's definitely more radical than that. I'll say that I have seen specific instances where there's an intuitive sense of wisdom in me that says this person needs to stop reading the Bible. And they need if they want,
kind of like Jedediah said, like sometimes people need to put it down and walk away from it for a while.
Yes. That's the thing is if you're addicted in this reciprocal narrowing way to a thing, it's not necessarily the thing that is the issue in the addiction. It's your relation to that thing. And so you need to stop that relation for a second and have something else, a new arena, a thing you can look at for the first time to start rehabilitating those neural pathways of meaning making and the overcoming of the deception of that addiction you had in relation to the Bible in order to understand how to act in a wise way. So, for example,
well, if I can pause right there, hold that example. It kind of reminds me of what John Vervaeke says, how you have cognitive disruptors. Now, say you're trying to solve a problem. Say you're trying to solve a math problem or figure out how you're going to make you're constructing something, you just can't figure something out. And the more you think about it, the less likely it is you're going to come up with an answer. But walk away, go do something completely different, forget about it, then come back, and you have a disruptor. And then when you come back after the disruptor, it's like a fresh insight. Your mind is fresh, and then you see things in a different way. I think some people need a Bible disruptor that's not, see, that's momentary. Maybe you can do that in a period of 30 minutes, but some people maybe need 3 months or 6 weeks, something like that.
Yes.
Maybe longer.
Yes.
To disrupt the old way of thinking and then come back and try again with a different perspective.
Yes.
So this example you were thinking of.
Yes. So like, I don't, so my wife had read one of the Platonic dialogues, and what she was she was struggling with getting a particular insight from from First John. Okay. And it's like, it was that exact problem where the way she was coached, the way she was trained, the way she was brought up to relate to the Bible was the relation was hindering her from seeing through the lens, the text of the scripture, or from cultivating the meaning. And she read one of the Platonic dialogues, and because she didn't approach it with this prefabricated structure of how you're supposed to read a Platonic dialogue, right? So she didn't have some hermeneutical method, right? That she had to apply. It was all intuitive. She just read it.
She's got it.
And boom, all of this insight. All of this insight. And
wow,
that's where I'm, the thing I'm not saying that I want to say is you should be reading and establishing connections with things in the world that give you a new pathways of challenging or pressing on like your current capacity to understand a certain thing.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but when it comes to wisdom and spiritual matters, that's going to mean that you have to engage with things that are outside of the propositional text of scripture.
Yes.
You can't get good at interpretation, textual interpretation, unless you are textually interpreting as many things as possible. That's it. The only way to become a good soccer player is to play soccer as much as possible on whatever field, in your backyard, in your parents, in the house, in like anywhere you possibly can. It can't just be on this specific soccer field in your hometown where you first learn how to kick a ball. So you're not going to be a good soccer player.
So there's this phenomenon that happens where if you take somebody to, say, a war memorial, and there's a little plaque out there, and it says that the general came over this hill with the horses and then attacked the left flank of the enemy over here on the downside of the, that kind of thing, on the south side of the hill. If you have somebody read that and you ask them what that means, they will say something like, well, the general came from this side with the horses and attacked on the south side of the hill. They will say pretty much what it says. If you tell them it's a religious text, they have no idea what it means. And that's the problem. We're reading, when people read the Bible like it's a religious text, or I don't know what it is. If you stick, I used to do a lot of street evangelism kind of stuff. You stick a newspaper in front of somebody's face, they can tell you exactly what it means. You put a clear as day Bible verse in front of somebody's face, because they can see the word Holy Bible on there. They have this preconceived notion that something other than what the words are saying is what it should say or mean, or something like that. People are strange like that. People are strange. And if people could just read the Bible, just like it is the text that's there, instead of this religious book, it'd be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It'd have more of a positive effect.
So how that relates to what we're trying to do on Friends of Wisdom is we're trying to apply the abstraction of that very principle, is that in order to gain a greater capacity of, available heuristics, available options, in order to interface with scripture, or more importantly, interface with your present tense situation, your life, we need to have practice. We have to have ways of practicing those life skills, like, for the sake, if you want to moralize and everything, for the sake of evangelism, so you think about it, and it's like when you're reading, we've been reading through Acts for a while, and it's like in Acts, in this great conversion of the Greek world and the Roman world, it's like we get these tiny, so very, very, very compressed descriptions of what happened. And when you think about it, it's like Paul spent, I don't know, I think like a year and a half in the city of Corinth, or I think, and we get like this much text on it.
Right.
And so you have to think to yourself, what was Paul doing that entire time?
Right.
For a year and a half.
It'll say like he spent 3 years in the school of Tyrannus and stuff like that. And it's just, you get a verse on it. You get a verse or two to cover 2-3 years worth of time.
So evangelism is, I'm sorry, but evangelism in a practical sense is not reducible to the question that came up last night. Oh, what would you say if somebody asked, how would I get saved? And like the moralism in you is like, oh, well, I would say, I would quote like Acts 8, or, something
16,
like that,
31,
or Romans 10 or something like, and it's like, yeah, the thing is Paul had this year and a half to dialogue with people, right, to generate and establish meaningful connections with people, and then wrote them letters about this really long and profound and strong cultivated relationship that he had with them through dialogue, through speaking. Right? It's faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. That establishment is made between people through dialogue. And if you think that evangelism is reducible down to a question and answer formula that's
completely propositional, right?
Completely propositional, and say 3 lines long, and boom, oh, saved, great. It's like, no. That is the making for synthetic and fragile Christianity.
Yep, that's right.
It is. So we need to become more practiced and better at cultivating meaningful relationships. And so that is ultimately the goal. That's the goal of this video series, is to not only establish meaningful relationships with others for its own sake, but also to have a tangential effect of the practice, the actual practice of dialogue, of entering into that space we were talking about before, where there's this participatory interaction between two agentic human beings that have the God-given capacity to exercise a set of interaction techniques and create something in themselves, mutually, reciprocally, and for people watching.
Right.
So, it goes back to the notion of the most transformative times in most people's lives come from, or at least are inceived by, some kind of conversation that somebody had.
Yep.
Like, and if you're not having meaningful conversations with other people in your life, then that is probably an indicator of a lot of things. But that authentic relationship and dialogue with someone else is so necessary. It's so deeply imminent to the nature of our being in the types of creatures that we are. Like for example, if we're made in the image of God, God is a very deeply relational being. He right. If you want to go into a whole Trinitarian doctrine about the thing, it's all about how God relates.
Everything with regard to meaning is how it relates to something else.
Yes.
Even when you're learning as a child, every word you learn is based on a definition of something else that it has some kind of connectivity to something else.
Exactly.
That's where meaning is. It's in connectivity.
It's in relationality. Exactly. And so if we if we want to have authentic Christianity, then we have to learn how to connect ourselves to that source of meaningful cultivation, which is logos. That's what it is.
So I'm sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
No.
Well, I have a comment down here that somebody says seminary type guys won't like Nick's claims. And if you think about what seminary is, you send a young man or young woman off to a school. It's Cartesian in its idea. You don't know how spiritually ready they are. You don't know how transformed they are. You don't know how wise they are, or how open they are to become wise. And you just send them off as if adding a quantity of data into their brain will prepare them for whatever thing. And that's not it at all. And then on the other hand, you have the Jewish Kabbalists who don't let anybody into their ranks until the age of 40. So there's some kind of expectation that there is some life experience to go along with the ability to assimilate the thing that needs to be taught. And if instead of seminaries, if we had something like a Sangha or something like that, where people learn practices for relating rather than learning a bunch of propositions that they're then going to turn around and eisegete back onto the text of Scripture, and they're going to in-group and out-group and weaponize and be rivalrous. They're going to keep doing all those bad things which perpetuate the meaning crisis. And they went to learn. And all that happened was they got reinforced in badness. They got reinforced in how to not be connected, and how to not grow, and how to not have meaning, and how to not have wisdom, which is sad.
That's right. And
they think that's Christianity.
Right. So it's wisdom is justified of her children. And so it's just, if you don't believe it, if you don't you just have to look out into your local church right now and see what's going on. And that's ultimately, that's really what Paul is getting at in 1 Timothy with, the office of some kind of bishop or leader is they're not to be a novice. And it's not a novice they can't recite the, the like Bible verses or something, and accurately like know exactly where they are and where the doctrine of this is found and in the doctrine of that is found. It's all about being a novice in something that has to do with relationality, because the thing is that the verses that not a novice verse is embedded in is that he's not to be the husband of one wife and to have his house in good order. It's all about his relationality to his family, to his ability to cultivate and sustain and flourish relations with his wife, his kids, his people, and he's not to be a novice in these things. I don't care if he can espouse to you the doctrine of election and predestination and all of that crap.
So it's interesting also. So we have not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, patient, not a brawler, not covetous. Now, if you think a brawler and a striker, you might think of people physically hitting each other with their hands. But I think there's also something to be said for this about not being rivalrous at all. Learn, like relating to people. I'm not going to strike somebody. I'm going to relate to a person. We're going to find out how to have a conversation with somebody, how to relate to somebody, how to establish meaning by connecting with another human being. How do I do that?
Yes, exactly. And more and more as I'm participating with Beyond the Fundamentals, and
it's interesting not know how to anyway.
Participating with Beyond the Fundamentals, and reading and engaging with the authors that I'm relating to, the more and more I find myself more rooted and grounded in this notion of Christ that Paul is talking about. And what that gives me the power to do is to be in conversation with somebody, or even just to listen to somebody on like CNN or something like that.
Yeah.
And really not be moved. Like not in a dogmatic or like rigid way.
Mm-hmm.
It's more not moved from the center of the form of who I am in Christ.
Right.
And it's like that centering is not destabilized, regardless of what comes out of a person's mouth or the actions that I see from from some person. And it really is giving me a better sense of what it means when Paul says to be rooted and grounded in love. And so really what I'm finding is the capacity to which I have to afford a sense of agape to someone else has grown tremendously.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's not, again, it's God that giveth the increase. It's not because of anything virtuous. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what I have decided is relevant and important. And one of those things is the chief thing that Solomon talks about, which is wisdom, because I find it to be necessary. And part of being able to cultivate and like generate the practice is I need someone else to be able to engage in it with me, because I need something to relate to.
Yes. Yep. So it's in the relating that wisdom can be found. I hate to say extracted or something like that, or maybe experienced.
Yeah. Cultivated.
Yeah. If we don't, maybe thinking of wisdom as something to have is a mistake.
Yeah. Okay, yes, I would love to talk about that, because the thing is that yes, at a propositional level, Proverbs does say get wisdom, get understanding, as if you can grab onto it in having mode. But that's not the point.
Right.
The point is also that wisdom is characterized
Maybe it'd be like if you were talking about a sport like soccer, get good.
right, exactly.
And you would have to be good. It's something you would have to do and be,
Yes.
not something you could put in your pocket and walk away with.
Right. It's not an artifact.
Right.
And the thing is that wisdom, because this is the Bible's wisdom right here. Because we have from our infancy kind of like pre-installed mechanisms in us that we know in a participatory way how to relate and interact with our mother, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deep interpersonal mechanism within us that knows deeply how to relate to a woman. Every single one of us, and specifically to a woman as we're born. And this is one of the reasons why the Bible characterizes wisdom not as an artifact or as an object or as a abstract kind of formula, like when you get a hold of some like mathematical formula, like E equals MC squared, but it's characterized as a woman. And the reason is because for interpretive reasons, like in the beginning of Proverbs, Solomon says, he states one of the purposes of writing the book of Proverbs, which is to get wisdom and understand a proverb in the dark sayings of the wise or something like that. It's like Proverbs 1:5 or something. I don't know. But one of the genius of the Bible is that it takes this notion of wisdom and it personifies her. And it does that because it knows that deep in your epistemic capacity is the ability to know a priori how to relate to a woman.
So didn't Jedediah say wisdom keeps you on your toes because it's a dance?
Yes. Yeah.
That stood out to me. Yeah.
Wisdom is characterized in Proverbs as a sister.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it says that because you don't interact with a brother. A brother in Proverbs is born for adversity, and that's a double entendre. They're born for adversity that the two of you will face together, and they're born for the competitive iron that sharpeneth iron kind of reason.
Right.
But you don't treat your brother the same way that you treat your sister.
Right.
There's a delicacy, there's a sensitivity that's there with a woman. And there's a lot of reasons in the Bible, and it's not just the Bible. Like you have to remember that the language and propositions of the Bible are embedded in Hebrew and Greek culture. And so there's notions there's notions in the Bible that are deeply enmeshed in a cultural phenomenon that's going on. And when you read ancient texts outside of the Bible that predate the Bible, wisdom a lot of the time is characterized as a woman. And there's intuitive relational reasons for that, is what I'm saying. It's not something that you think that you get a hold of like and possess. It's something you relate to.
It's like the mythopoetic feminine, that if you relate to the female, if you relate to the feminine, it brings something forth. There's a potential fecundity there. And
Yes, because
it's in relating to it that the thing comes forth, not in having it.
and there's a reciprocal end of that too, because it calls you forth as well. Like wisdom crieth in the streets, calling you forth. So there's a mutual kind of like attractor, right? That has nothing to do with you like possessing some kind of thing. It has everything to do with the in-between space and the quality of that in-between space, which is the relationship. That's where, like you said earlier, that's where the meaning is found. And I think you said something like wisdom has to do with relationality, with connection, So again, the point, really what people should be looking for their sakes, for my sake, for your sake, the sake of the channel, when they're watching these interrogative dialogues, is not just simply what is being said, but how is the practice of relationality showing up in this conversation? And when it does, if it does, what is that? What is that thing? That's what they should be looking for. Because it's something that has to be trained. I mean, that's why the whole book of Proverbs is written.
So to juxtapose that with what people tend to look for, because when you try to do something, when you try to pursue something that seems meaningful, you get a lot of criticism from people. And one of the most frequent forms of criticism is people trying to map what's happening to something bad. Like if I have John Vervaeke on the program, we had somebody in the comments say, "Oh, you're worshiping him." Or if, Jedediah talks about sophiology, someone says, "Oh, you're a Gnostic." Everyone's always there. It's, we said this the other day, it's kind of like it's kind of like a child in the dark, where when you close your eyes and when you can't see, you imagine all kinds of horrible things. And when somebody doesn't know the exact grounding where you're coming from and they listen, what they're really listening for, instead of listening for something they can use, they're listening for something that they can use to dismiss you. Like, "Oh, I know that XYZ is bad. And he used a word that Joel Osteen uses, or he used a word that the Pope uses, or he used a word that Peter Ruckman uses. And therefore, I can just map them completely to them. And since I've dismissed Peter Ruckman, I can dismiss everything they have to say because that's what they are." And
right.
That's what they're doing. This is Gnosticism, or this is the emerging church, or this is something like that. And that's not what's happening at all. We're not following any kind of gated institutional narrative or party line or any other effort somewhere else. We're genuinely trying to follow this model that we see in Scripture of Christians relating to each other and finding the thing in there that you need. So that thing, after you've been through a few experiences in life, and you listen to somebody who kind of knows what they're talking about you might disagree with a bunch of what they say, but you get so much that you can use as well. Why not celebrate that?
Yeah. Joe Carter had something really awesome to say in the comments section in regard to that notion, where he said something to the effect of like, yeah, when people lose the maps that tell them what the world is and what everything is in the world, when they encounter something that doesn't fit inside that map, then it's like they're completely lost.
Completely lost.
They're actually lost.
And they go into defensive mode.
And part of the reason why
they actually what? I spoke over you.
No, it's okay. The reason why they get defensive is because implicit in the only map they use is that hermeneutic of suspicion that we talked about a couple weeks ago, where everything that is unknown is to be like, you're to put up these ideological walls. And so when you're dealing with somebody who is ideologically possessed by those kinds of maps, then it becomes so much harder for you to establish a connection with them.
Right.
Because
they're used to connecting on a shared proposition set.
Yes.
And they don't know how to connect based on just relating to another human being.
Yes. Yes.
You know, sorry if I cut you off, but one of the things I've really enjoyed lately is that in the past, my my social circles have all been Christian. And what that means is that as soon as you start to think differently about something in the Bible, you lose your social circle, and might not just lose them, but they might just come right out and attack you. And it's kind of nice. Like right now, I'm involved in several things that are they're not really religious in nature. For example, my wife and I play in volleyball leagues, right? And when you're relating to somebody, they relate to you because they're relating to you, not because you fit some mold of their belief system.
Yes.
I actually, now that I'm interacting outside a Christian social circle, I actually feel like someone cares about me. Whereas inside the propositional type of Christianity, I didn't feel like they cared about me. I felt like they cared about how much I could bolster their ideology. And that is the degree to which they accepted me and related to me. And beyond that, against that, outside of that, they did not actually care about me. You cross that proposition set one time, you're out. They don't care about you. You're done. See you. You're marked. Get out. That kind of thing. Wow.
Yeah. This has been an interesting experience for me, because I constantly feel like I'm in translator mode, where I don't feel like I can stand and be who I am and relate to another person.
Right.
Because once there's the presence of this tyrannizing churchianity present within the situation I find myself in, I find myself moving from who I know that I am into this translator mode, where I have to try and take up the cognitive capacity to filter and check what that authentic person would say,
right,
and translate it with fidelity in a way that communicates it to the person I'm speaking to or find myself with. And also for this like looming kind of Pharisee that's sitting there just waiting to
pounce,
to hear some kind of word and basically play the sophist. You know
something
what I'm
they can
saying?
weaponize.
So that they can
Just
weaponize
and hear something they can weaponize, and not listening to hear.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's really funny because I just want to backpedal on one thing, which was the healthiness of being able to situate yourself in a circumstance where wisdom is needed, and that is not within the parameters of some kind of familiar doctrine or behavioral pattern or something.
Yep.
So I just read the Platonic dialogue, Parmenides, and what's cool is there's a notion in Romans that Paul is getting at in Romans chapter 3, where he's hyperbolically trying to convey that there's nobody that does good no, not one. And he's doing this with an intended reason, right? To communicate the righteousness of God and the gospel from Romans 16 and 17. And in the Platonic dialogue, Parmenides, Socrates is explaining and arguing with, and not arguing in a rivalrous way, with Parmenides about, is there a good, can a man be good? And the exact same language comes out of Socrates' mouth in that dialogue. And he makes the same exact argument that Paul is making in Romans about how there is no man who is ultimately good. And because there's all these reasons for that. But and actually he does use the word sin. There's reasons of sin, that no man is all encompassingly good. And one of the things he says is, and if there ever does come such a man, I need you to point him out to me, Parmenides, which is so kind of, because it's foreshadowing Christ in these ways. And then one of the other things that Socrates articulates that's so helpful in understanding Paul is, he says, well, there is no man who is being good, or I'm sorry, it bees good, like ultimately, but a man can become good in a specific scenario and like move himself into a good act. So he articulates that for you so that you don't fall into this Calvinistic sort of
dualistic dyad
or soft, like a sophisticated technique of playing on Paul's words and looking to encapsulate that whole thing. So it's just an example of how, that dialogue is written down 300 to 400 years before Paul even starts articulating Romans. And it can be very helpful to consider and engage and develop a technical know-how and practice of how to understand and make a meaningful connection between you and some other meaning-making machine or meaning-making being in the form of, an author, a book, a conversation, what have you. Sorry.
No, that's excellent. I'm thinking of things in Romans as you're talking. So one of the things I want to say about the series is packaging. I want people to think about the packaging in which it comes, because deceivers come in, according to Romans 16, 17 through 18, they come with good words and fair speeches. If when some of these guys are coming on, I think, unless I have slipped up and didn't know it, because I might, I think this series has been the first time cuss words have been said on the channel. I don't know. So that's been kind of interesting. And then to see people's reactions to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I recognize that in order to get good information, sometimes it might not be packaged as you would wish. Right. And there will be people out there listening where as soon as they hear what they consider to be profanity, they're going to turn it off and stop listening and have all kinds of ridicule and scolding and things like that. In the Bible, profane babblings are things that disorient you. And you also might like, if you think there's some value in what Ruckman says, it comes in Ruckman's packaging. You see, that's how you get it. If you like what Hovind says, you have to get it from somebody who's been to prison for a while. It's like there's something that comes along with a good message to turn away insincere people. It's kind of how I see it. And so the people who really want the truth, there's a, I've heard this in Christian and Zen circles where somebody asks for the truth and an old man takes the young man out into the ocean, and then he holds his head under the water, and then he comes back up and he's like, well, what'd you do that for? He says, well, when you want truth as bad as you just wanted air, you'll find it. And
Right.
when people are willing, when you have so much good content and people are willing to turn away from it for something frivolous and stupid like that, it tells me they're not really interested in finding truth.
Yeah.
They're interested in racking up brownie points for some kind of whatever virtue signaling kind of thing they got going on, probably deceiving their own selves. But that packaging, I'm not just talking about, the occasional profanity that some of these guys might come on here, but they might say things that sound like a Catholic, or that sound like an Eastern Orthodox, or that sound like a Gnostic. And as much flack as I give the Calvinists for being Gnostic, I will say this: there's actually quite a bit of signal in Gnosticism worth considering. And I'll say that about any kind of system. And it's kind of funny when I'm tangling with those guys, they don't know where I'm coming from on this, but there's signal in everything. It would, instead of denying it, it would be kind of wise of them probably to say, well, there's some signal in everything. And of course, there's probably some overlap there, maybe even some, a causal relationship. But there's signal in just about everything if you can find it. There's signal in The Lion King.
Yeah.
And in Star Wars, if
Yeah.
you just know where to look. And so there's some kind of signal in everything, but there's people in the audience who every time they hear something that they can map to something bad, that's going to, if it's packaged in that kind of terminology or in that kind of association, like maybe the person is Eastern Orthodox or a Catholic or a practicing Gnostic, for God's sake, or a Mason or something like that, and they just can't stomach it. I cannot countenance this evil in front of my face. I am too good. I am too virtuous for this. I shall avert my eyes and my ears elsewhere because I'm too good for you. Well, they need to get over themselves. There's some signal there.
Did you ever take acting lessons or something? Because you've got some impressive imitation skills.
Oh, thanks. It just comes out.
I think the favorite one is
I played Mr. Jenkins in a
Brother Melms
high school play, or a sixth grade play.
But so that thing with the packaging,
yeah,
that thing, getting people to notice what that thing is, that is getting them to try and map whatever they're hearing to some sort of, heresy or, like suspicious, nefarious thing that's trying to thwart the word of God or thwart the truth in some way. What that is in the Ephesians 4 sense is the old man.
Mm-hmm.
And
part
of the reason why we're trying to engage in this series is based off of all of the insights that we've been gleaning off of Ephesians 4 for the better part of a year now. And one of those things is we see the whole broadcast modality shift. And then we get into these more specific kinds of characterizations and, exhortations that Paul is expounding upon. And one of those is to put off the former conversation. Now, that can be understood as the way in which you are approaching situations, like your walk, but it can also be taken just straight literally, and like to put off the former conversation, because all of the next like exhortations in the next verses, every single one of them has to do with some kind of relationality, like not lying or not stealing, and like very relational things like that. And so getting people to identify the thing that is cutting off genuine communication or genuine contact with another human being or another, meaning-making entity, that's the old man.
So you could say that maturity in the new man is the ability to relate to somebody despite those boundaries that your old man would object to.
I would say that, right, we all understand the new man to be like, analogous to Christ, like it is Jesus. And it's like, you don't just stop. Just stop for a second. You don't think that Jesus Christ could just have a conversation with anybody.
Yeah. He hung out with publicans and sinners.
And so, it just.
But he probably wouldn't have hung out with a sophiologist or with somebody who does circling or somebody who went to Burning Man.
Right.
Jesus is probably too virtuous for that.
Thank you. It's funny because it says he hid himself.
It'd be funny to come up with a list of things that Jesus was too virtuous to do.
Yeah. He cut himself off and hid from the people who were trying to cut off his relationship with others.
Yeah.
The Pharisees.
Yeah, that's right.
The ones he hid himself from were the very ones who were trying to find every reason not to relate or establish a connection with someone else.
Yeah.
That's it. And then went and died for them.
Yeah. Crazy. So let me tell you what I want to do is, we're thinking of having you and I having this dialogue as an intro so people can see what's going on. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe having like a regular after show, we have a Friends of Wisdom thing where a guest you have a discussion with them, and then we could come on and talk about some key points and kind of digest some of those for the audience here, and maybe bring in some others as well and have a 3 or 4 way conversation. I know Roberta had some interesting comments too.
Yeah, I think that there could be a lot of that could be advantageous, for a lot of reasons, because, this is actually kind of what you're proposing, I think, is to invoke an actual practice of aporia. Like you're carving out space for us to engage and get a sense of what it's like to try and interact with something, some, form or some kind of idea or practice. Like, you go to soccer practice or something like that. You go through all of the drills and all of the specific techniques, and then you do what's called a cool down, right? So you let your body kind of saturate itself into all of the crazy, techniques that it just went through, and you give it some kind of a recovery space to come back to center and allow, there's technical terms for it that aren't coming to mind, but that it's almost like you're carving out an intentional space for us to do that, and not just to do it individually. Like, I'd be very interested to see how that is in a more distributed way. So how the notion of aporia happens with you and me, or, with Roberta, or with Josh, or with somebody who is, who would want to try and do that. That could be pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking of, say you have a conversation with a guest, and then we take, say, 8 or 12 statements out of it. And then there's no opt out. Everybody takes turns saying how it made them feel or what they thought about it. Something like that. No opt outs.
Yeah. And because it also makes people optimize for tuning in, like really paying attention to what is being said, not about the truth or falsity of the thing. Right. But about how is it affecting you?
And think about that guy. Like, what do you think about that person who said that? What did he have to go through to come to the place in his life where he would say that thing?
Right. So now the exercise of
Uh,
perspectival,
you got some empathy going on. You got
yeah,
perspectival awareness.
yeah. And
Yeah.
you know what would be great is if you got everybody to focus on one statement or something that, and then they had to report on how it made them feel. And someone came back and said, that made me feel like, this person's a heretic. And like, this is like so out of line, like no person in Christian history would ever agree with that statement. And it's like, but the fact that you noticed that you felt that is so transformative in
part of the calibrating
important
process.
If just one person does that, I'm gonna like jump for joy. That would be awesome.
Yeah. If somebody comes up and says to me that, nobody in Christian history has ever said that, I take that as a compliment. But, divergent thinking. Nobody in Christian history has has faced the issues that we're facing today. They may have faced worse ones, which that's another conversation, because I've been thinking a lot about a few things that are going on right now, especially with the stuff we were talking about earlier on the radio. I'm thinking about population decrease and I don't know, all kinds of things, nation states, whatever. Anyway, so we've been doing this since 5:30. It's probably about time to wrap it up. What do we want to leave this? But what I do want to do is I want to come back maybe once a week or, every once in a while and do this again after some of these other conversations and kind of digest them a little bit.
Yeah.
But for this session, what do we want to leave with?
What we want to leave with is a sense of orientation and purpose to different dialogues that people are going to be having on the channel, and to recognize that the instantiation of these ways, these types of dialogues, these new conversations are going to be deep, really, really important in the cultivation of ecologies of practices that afford Christian transformation towards the conforming of the image of Christ. So the point is, all of these YouTube channels that are, posting debates about whether or not predestination is biblical, like it's just got to stop. It just has to stop, because it's really like propagating all kinds of sophistry and like disintegration and degeneration of authentic Christian relationship.
So you said, go ahead.
No. It's just I'm sorry, but it's the opposite of the body fitly joined together unto the edification of itself.
That's exactly right.
It is eroding at those relationships because the act of sophistry, the purpose of sophistry is it's the anti-logos, it's anti-meaning, it's the cancer of meaning. It eats away and erodes at meaning. And like we've said in this discussion, it's the very cultivation of relationship with others that has the supernatural power to create and flourish and make all things new in Christ, which is, it's so in the foreground of all of what Paul is saying in his letters, in all of these debates and, nonsense about, like theology and soteriology and all of those things. It's just disorienting distraction, and it's starting to upset me because of what it's doing to Christians and what it's cutting them off from. It's cutting them off from the body, which is the life of Christ.
So you said orient. You want people to become properly oriented as a result of this. And that, it makes me think if you're properly oriented, you're properly attuned, and you're learning how to use discernment, things like that. If you had a bunch of properly oriented people and people who had discernment capacity and who could embody wisdom, you wouldn't actually have any false teachers, because there would be no false learning. You see, everybody would know how to separate the signal from the noise, and no matter what anybody said, people would not be picking up what they're putting down. They would be rejecting it as, and not in a judgment sense, like I've compared the formula with the formula and it doesn't match mine, but in a discernment sense, be able to listen to somebody who is propositionally wrong, but still get something procedurally, perspectively, and participatorily correct out of it. Right. And be able to relate to somebody at the same time. The ability to relate to somebody you don't think you can relate to is a maturity skill that we need to develop.
It's essential. Yeah. So this is our attempt at that.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the next one. So we're talking to somebody tomorrow. We got something lined up for what, 4 p.m. Central tomorrow?
5 p.m. 4 p.m. Central.
4 p.m. Central.
Eastern.
Is it safe to give his name out yet, or you want?
Oh yeah. So Michael Martin. So he's a Christian philosopher, and he's also a poet. And so what we're going to try and, well, I don't want to put parameters on anything, but what we're going to try and tease out of him is the series is aimed at trying to simultaneously get the contents of a wisdom practice or a wisdom tradition out, and then in the midst of extracting those, practice them all in one. Because dialogue, the logos can maintain all of that. It can maintain it, and we just have to try and get better at it. So that's exciting.
So tomorrow at 4, Michael Martin, you said his name was? Yeah, Michael Martin tomorrow at 4. All right, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to that. All right, this has been fun. I appreciate you coming on. Again, short notice. That's how it seems to be these days. But it's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next time. I'll be tuning in tomorrow at 4.
All right, Kevin.
All right.
See ya.